on Erev Yom Kippur. Erev Yom Kippur is an interesting day, actually. First of all, Erev Yom Kippur has a din of being a little bit like a Yom Tov day, so there'll be no tachnun during davening. We don't say either Mizmor Todah. Now, if anybody here is familiar with the way that the tefillah is built, so Mizmor Todah appears in Psukei Tzimra, right? In Psukei Tzimra, it's considered to be a very important chapter of Tehillim. I think it's chapter 100, and it's normally recited. You're supposed to recite it standing up, and it's not recited on Erev Yom Kippur. Why is that?
How about Erev Rosh Hashanah?
Or Erev Rosh Hashanah, you do recite it. There are only 2 days in the year, weekdays during the year, that we don't recite it. One is Erev Yom Kippur, one is Erev Pesach. Right? Why is that? Because, let's start with Yom Kippur first. The Todah, the Mizmor Todah, the psalm takes the place of the Korban Todah, which is a thanksgiving offering which is offered up in the temple. It was brought for all kinds of various reasons people might have had for wanting to give thanks to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And it was allowed to be eaten. The Korban Todah was allowed to be eaten on the day that it was brought and the next day as well. Now, I'm not going to go into all the details over here, but inside of the korbanos, inside of the sacrifices, there was a whole list of things. Sometimes some of them had to be eaten on the same day, some could be eaten that day and the next night, some of them could be eaten that day, the next night, and the next day as well. The Todah, the Thanksgiving offering, was something which was allowed to be eaten the next day. What's the problem? On Yom Kippur, you don't eat, right? It's a fast day. So on Yom Kippur, Erev Yom Kippur, no Todah, Thanksgiving offerings were brought to the temple, and subsequently, because no one brought Thanksgiving offerings to the temple, we don't recite Mizmor Todah inside of Tefillah either, because it's a remembrance of what took place inside of the temple. That takes care of Yom Kippur. What about Erev Pesach? So interestingly enough, the Korban Todah was actually a very interesting sacrifice, and it was not made from an animal. It was made from a meal offering.
That's why.
And it was made from both chametz and matzah. It was made from leavened and unleavened, brought together. And there's a whole Torah behind it. There's a whole idea behind it. It's a very beautiful concept. The idea that when we bring the non-leavened, which is the matzah, that's come to remind us of the great miracles that God did for us. He took us out of Egypt. Those are like the big, something miraculous happens to you. It's clear that God is there. The regular leavened part of the korban, of the sacrifice, which is the bread part of the sacrifice. So that's just to remind us that within inside of nature, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's there the whole time as well. We shouldn't lose sight of that. Right? The bread is as miraculous as everything else is, but we take it for granted because it grows and we can make it, and we think that it's something that we're formulating, but really it comes from God. Why is no Mizmor Todah recited on Erev Pesach? Because on Erev Pesach nobody brought Thanksgiving offerings either, because it could be eaten the next day and it contained chametz. Right? The next day is Pesach already, yeah.
Then why... You make it sound like it would have been okay to bring that same meal offering with chametz during Pesach.
Nearly all meal offerings that were brought were not chametz. It was actually pretty rare to have chametz brought to the temple. There were a few things. The biggest exception to the rule were the 2 loaves of bread that were brought on Shavuot, right, which were absolutely chametz. But as a rule, when it talks about meal offerings, it's normally talking about non-leavened. Some kind of non-leavened offering. Right? So over here, the Todah offering was different. It was a combination of leavened and non-leavened, and that's why on Pesach, Erev Pesach, it wasn't recited. We don't recite Mizmor Todah because nobody brought Korban Todah on Erev Pesach because it can be eaten the next day, but the next day is Pesach and you can't eat chametz.
But then, same question, replacing meal offering with Todah offering. Why wouldn't they bring it during the rest of Pesach instead of just on Erev Pesach?
Which one? The Todah? Because first of all, during special days, you didn't bring personal offerings. Right? So any kind of a Yom Tov, you didn't bring a special offering. On Shabbat, you didn't bring a special offering. They were days that set aside only for communal offerings. Right? Which is why...
we don't do Tachanun on Yom
It's not to do so much to do with the sacrifice, but it's to do with the fact that it's a joyous day, right? Tachnun is centered around the concept of not having the temple. What about Tisha B'Av?
Is not a Yom Tov?
In Mitzvah Hashem, it will be, right? What's interesting about Tisha B'Av is that on Erev Tisha B'Av, we also don't say Tachnun. And on Tisha B'Av itself, we don't say Tachnun, right? Because it's the most terrible, tragic day, but Mitzvah Hashem, when the Mashiach comes, it will turn into a real Yom Tov, the real thing. Right? Yeah? So, just so you should know that on Erev Yom Kippur, that's what's going to be. There'll be no Mizmor Torah, there'll be no Tachnun, we don't say Lamnatzeach. All of these things are things which are recited normally on regular weekdays. Erev Yom Kippur is not a regular day. It's not a Yom Tov day exactly, but it's not a not Yom Tov day either. However, there is a custom on Erev Yom Kippur which will put a smile on your face. Something's going to have to do this, right? It'll put a smile. You should have a full shalema. There is a mitzvah to eat on Erev Yom Kippur. It's a mitzvah. It's not a dioraita, but it's a mitzvah to eat on Erev Yom Kippur. The Shulchan Aruch says, we'll get to the Sudas as well, but not just within the Sudas, but in general, to eat on Erev Yom Kippur. The Shulchan Aruch says that somebody who eats on Erev Yom Kippur is considered by God to have fasted on the 9th and the 10th of Tishrei. Right? It's as if their eating is considered to be the equivalent of fasting on Yom Kippur, and it's considered to be very meritorious.
Have a certain time to eat until, and then fast begins.
Yeah, that's for sure. Which means like this: that Erev Yom Kippur, we're going up until sunset. Once it gets to sunset, that's it. You can't eat anything anymore because the fast has now begun. But up until then, the whole of the day preceding Yom Kippur, up until sunset, it's a mitzvah to eat. They say that Rabbi Yisrael Salanta, who was the founder of the Muslim movement, would eat raisins all day long on Erev Yom Kippur, because raisins are small little things, they don't fill you up too much. And but on the other hand, you're eating something, which means you're fulfilling that mitzvah of eating on Erev Yom Kippur.
Is it about constantly eating, or like just to eat?
Well, it's certainly to eat. You're going to eat 2 meals on Erev Yom Kippur, which we'll talk about in Mitzvah Hashem when we get to them. But in between the 2 meals as well, if you want to add and you want to become, maybe I would imagine most people want to become super frum with this particular mitzvah, right? Mm-hmm. And that way you can, eat. The more you eat on Erev Yom Kippur, right? The greater is your fulfilling of the idea of eating on Erev Yom Kippur. Yeah.
Why? So if it's right before a fast, why would Rabbi Salanter eat only raisins and not a lot of food to get him filled?
Oh, so first of all, he ate the 2 su'udot that you have to eat. That's for sure.
Raisins before.
Oh, hold on. He ate the 2 su'udot before Yom Kippur that you're supposed to eat. That's for sure he ate. But what about the bits in between? So most foods that you eat, when you keep eating them, they'll fill you up at some point, and you'll be stuffed, and you won't be able to eat the suda either. I guess Rabbi Yisrael Salanta felt that raisins were innocuous enough, they were small enough that you could eat them every now and then, just keep nibbling on them all the way through, and it's not going to fill you up to the point where you can't eat the Suda. If you don't like raisins, don't eat raisins.
Because you got to have 2 Sudas.
Right before the fast and like 2 hours before that?
Earlier on and towards the fast. We'll talk about it in Mitzvah Hashem. Okay, let's talk about kaparot.
Who you calling a kaparot?
Oh, you people are mine, that's for sure. What is kaparot? So there is a custom that is brought down in the Shulchan Aruch. It's something which got a very early origins, where you are supposed to take a rooster if you are male. Now, we're not going to discuss over here who is male and who's not. Right? This is not the format for these kinds of discussions. Okay? So you can, looking relieved, that Baruch Hashem, right? If you are male, you take a rooster. If you are not a male, then you take a hen, right? A female chicken. And the idea is to take this rooster and to wave it around your head 3 times reciting certain verses that go together with it. There, kaparati, there, right? And this chicken is going to go to charity, or this chicken is going to be offered up, and the meat is going to be given out. The whole idea over here is first of all, to try to reach a level of understanding that you need to atone for your sins, and secondly, to add more mitzvot into your mitzvah bank on Erev Yom Kippur.
Erev Yom
Now,
Kippur we do this?
you can do it on Erev Yom Kippur. There'll be kaparot around already from after Rosh Hashanah. So you can do it at any point, whatever it's good for you. Right? Now,
Are they
just
going to bring any here?
I don't know if they bring them to the yeshiva, I don't know.
What about the
I don't think so. Here.
we do with money?
Oh, 1 minute. Okay, like with everything. Many people are not that crazy about doing kaparot with live chickens. What?
Live chicken.
Yeah, live roosters. 1 minute. In a minute, I'll tell you a story about it, right?
You grab the neck or grab the feet?
You normally take it either by the feet or by the wings, not by the neck. However, there is definitely some people are definitely concerned about the concept of what's called tzala balachayim, which is causing animals to have unnecessary pain, right? So there are other ways of doing the mitzvah. You can do the mitzvah with fish, right? Which is like, if you ask me, that's even more complicated because fish are slippery. And whilst you're going like that, it'll probably go flying off somewhere, who knows where. The simplest
Sushi
way, the simplest,
It's got to be a live fish.
yeah.
Oh, so
The simplest way of doing kaparot is, so I know it's the simplest way, but the cleanest,
Jubot.
most hygienic way of doing kaparot is with money. So you take the cost of whatever a rooster would cost you. Let's say, I'm just throwing out a figure. Let's say it's 50 shekels. So you would take 50 shekels and you would use that. You would have that, circle that around your head.
Do you keep
say
in mind
the
this
words.
is supposed to be a rooster?
Oh, so it says like this. Instead of saying, so zeh ha-tanigol yelech le, you say, zeh ha-tzedakah yelech le, zeh ha-kesef yelech le-tzedakah. This money will go to charity. And you can fulfill your mitzvah that way, and then the money gets given out to the poor people,
that a lot
and they are allowed to, they use that money in order to be able to buy their needs for Yom Tov. Hold on 1 second. The union of the kaparot with a rooster or with a hen is the idea that once you've done your kaparot, it's shechted, it's slaughtered, and the meat is given out to the poor people.
I'd rather give the money.
Yeah, okay, say that.
Fair enough.
The poor money having to go through that.
Yeah, I can't put an
That's
animal through
mistreatment
that.
of money.
Mistreatment
Let me
of
ask you a
money.
question.
Anybody who's very concerned about the mistreatment of
I might
money,
have an answer.
you can feel
Let me
free
ask you a
to,
question.
you
You have
know,
a nest.
deposit your money with me, and I'll
Three
look
eggs
after
in
it
a- in
very
a bird.
carefully.
This is after Rosh Hashanah or before
After
Yom
Rosh
Kippur?
Hashanah, normally after Rosh Hashanah and before Yom Kippur, yeah.
In between Asarat Yom Teshuvah?
Yeah.
And is there Nusach Sfard, Nusach Ashkenazi?
I don't know. I don't imagine that the Nusach is very different between Ashkenaz and Sfard.
ומה זה לכפר על העוונות?
Lechaper al havanot. The problem is, according to some people, they look at this idea of kaparot as being something which is somewhat, what's the right word? Superstitious, perhaps. This idea that if I do kaparot, then no, I've got rid of my chataim, I've got rid of my sins, and I don't need to worry, right? So some people were actually against the concept of doing kaparot. It was going to make people think that that's it. You know, I'm going to walk into Yom Kippur, I've done kaparot, therefore I'm as clean and as free as can be, right? Which is not true. It's just a part of the process, right? I would recommend like this. If you're going to do kaparot with money, which I think is the simplest way to do it, then you can definitely give your money to Rabbi Samit, and he'll be able to give it out. Unfortunately, he's got a long list of families who are very, very needy, and you know, they'll be absolutely ecstatic to be able to get some extra money to be able to help out with the with the extra expenses of Yom Tov. And otherwise, if you've got a family of your own that you want to give it to, for sure, feel free to do so. I have only ever done kaparot once with a live chicken in my life.
Oh,
Did you have a bad experience?
It was not a bad experience at all, actually. It was about as traumatic as it gets. It was beyond bad. It was terrible.
Why? What happened?
I had a car accident years ago, about 30 years ago. I had a car accident which actually was quite miraculous. Not being hurt at all was miraculous, and perhaps being alive was miraculous. I think God needed me here in this world in order to make you people suffer. So I went to, it was actually during the 10 days of repentance, around this time of the year. So I went to somebody took me, I didn't go, somebody took me to a Kabbalist. And I walked into the room, and the Kabbalist, the first time I saw somebody wearing tefillin all day long. It was like the afternoon, and he was sitting there learning Torah wearing his tefillin. Anyway, I went in over there, and he takes one look at me, and he says, I see black clouds above your head. Right? So, I don't know, when people go to a Kabbalist, I don't know what you people do. You're probably supposed to take this stuff seriously, right? But like an idiot, I look up to see, what's he talking about? Black cloud. I haven't seen black clouds. I just see the ceiling. It's like, anyway, he told me that I should give charity, and I should go and do kaparot with a rooster to do it properly. Anyway, so I went off to Meir Sharim, and I went into there's a little market in Meir Sharim inside, and I went into the first butcher shop that I could find, and there was this little fellow, right? And he was a butcher, and he says to me, kaparot, and I'm like, yeah, I guess, that's what everyone's doing this time of the year, If loach shavas ematai, if you're not going to do it now, when are you going to do it? So he got out the meanest, biggest rooster you could possibly imagine.
Meanest.
So this thing's like looking at me, and I'm looking at it, right? We're trying to see who's going to stare each other down over here. It's like, and so finally, this little itty bitty fellow, he says to me, he says, "Mate," he says, "I'm mafached." Are you scared?
He stirred you up.
Who, me? Well, actually, I didn't say that. I said, well, who? Me?
Who's doing kaparot with who?
What makes you think that? So he points to the ceiling. There was a ceiling fan. He points to the ceiling, he says, listen, he says, if you're scared, he says, we can tie it up here. And I'll switch it on a few times. Hey, do you know who you're talking to? Oh my gosh. So anyway, so the one and only time I picked up this thing, and I did it as quick as I could, right? And that's the only time I've ever done kaparot with a live rooster. Maybe you want to try it, maybe you don't. I normally prefer to do it with inanimate money. It's a lot easier. It's a lot less scary, that's for sure. Although the idea of waving money around your head is...
Did it scream while it was in the air?
Who?
The chicken.
Actually, no, it didn't do anything.
No, they stay still, believe it or not.
Didn't do anything.
Always brought up.
Anyway, with regards to kaparot, the one thing that's important to know is that the money that you use should be regular money. It shouldn't be money that you set aside to give to charity to begin with, right? It's something called maaser, right? When you give a tenth of whatever you've got to charity. However, when you come to do kaparot, when you use the money either to buy the chicken or to use money to waive just the money itself, you should use your own money and not money that's been designated and set aside for charity. Okay, here's the bad news with regards to atonement and repentance. Yom Kippur, which of course is the holiest day of the year, is a day which allows us to reach a level of repentance and atonement between ourselves and God. It does not help us reach a level of atonement and repentance with regards to people that we've done things to that we shouldn't have done. For that, you've got to go to the person and ask for their forgiveness. Right?
What if it's better not to say anything?
Huh?
What if it's better not to say anything?
Rabbi Yisrael Salanta
What?
has... What if it's better not to say anything, right? So let's say, for example, somebody did something to somebody else that the person's maybe he's not aware of it, or somebody said something about somebody else, right? But the person doesn't know about it. And if you go to the person and you say, listen, I just wanted to let you know that I did whatever I did, right? And the person's going to get really, really upset. Then the question over here now is, what are you supposed to do? Are you supposed to go to him or are you not supposed to go to him? Well, if he's the kind of person where he's going to get so upset and he's not going to forgive you for what you've done, then Rabbi Yisrael Salanta says that it's better not to approach the person to begin with. even though you now can't get complete repentance for what you've done, which means you can certainly repent up to a certain point. I won't do it again, and I'll be more careful about what I say or what I do, right? But with regards to that particular person, you're stuck. But it's going to be better for the other person not to know what you've done. So it could be that you should not be going to ask him for forgiveness. Now, I want you to listen carefully because it's kind of important, and it's a little bit, whatever. It's not great, but the thing is like this: asking repentance, asking for people to forgive you. It's not a case of going up to somebody and saying, "Hey, forgive me." Yeah, sure, you forgive me. That's not the way it works. It doesn't work like that. Which means you got to. People do it all the time, right? Before Yom Kippur, that's what everybody does,
Yeah, like nothing.
It's not that, and that's not. It's not good. It really isn't. You're not achieving anything by doing that very much. What you need to do is that you need to ask forgiveness for the specific things that you may have done, right? And that, of course, we all of us know that that's difficult. It's hard to do that. It's a lot easier just like, "Hey, forgive me."
I can't even
You
remember.
remember in high school? Remember what I did? Sorry.
Yeah.
What do you do if somebody says no? Do you forgive me? No.
Then you don't forgive them right back.
That's his problem.
And
Well-
you know what?
No, it's
you
not.
let
You
up
need to
let
ask
the
him
monkeys
3
off your back.
times.
You did what you gotta do.
And then you
Here,
have to
listen.
get 3 different guys to.
Here, listen, very good, right? In order to get forgiveness from somebody, you go up to somebody and you ask them for forgiveness and they say, "No, I don't forgive you." You've got to go and ask them for forgiveness 3 times in 3 different ways. Right? So here, for example, it's not like, you got somebody say, "Hi, do you forgive me?" "No." "Do you forgive me?" "No." "Do you forgive me?" "No." Okay. It's your problem now, not mine. Ha ha ha. But rather, you go up the first time you ask him if he forgives you, and then maybe you go with somebody else, or you ask in a different way, right? And you've got to do it in 3 different times. And if each time he says no, after the 3rd time, it's not your problem anymore. You've done everything you were supposed to do. The fact that he doesn't forgive you now becomes his issue and not yours. So listen carefully, because this is very, very disturbing, right? Somebody has done something to somebody else. Reuven has done something to Shimon which is truly bad. Where is he supposed to forgive him from? Right, we're not talking over here about, I don't know, he put a dent in his new car, right? We're talking about something really, really terrible, something fundamental, something which is, how am I supposed to forgive that person for what they've done? So I want you to hear very carefully. I've always said, listen, the concept of forgiveness. By forgiving somebody for what they've done, you are not absolving that person from their responsibility towards you. It's a misunderstanding, it's a misconception. Most people, hold on a second, most people imagine that if I forgive this person for what he's done to me, then that's it, he's off the hook, finished, right? But it's not true. So let's take a simple example. Your next door neighbor's playing ball and he breaks your window, right? And he comes and he says, "I'm terribly, terribly sorry, do you forgive me?" "Yeah, for sure, I forgive you." Does that take away his obligation to pay for the damage that he's done? No. No, not at all. There's no connection between the two, right?
But what if the person doesn't say, "I don't have an interest in paying for it"? Like, you don't have to pay for it.
Then he has
So
Oh, if the owner of the window says,
I forgive you.
"You know what? It's
Mistakes
fine.
happen.
These things happen. I was a kid once, right? I broke my fair share of windows. Don't worry about it. I'll take care of it." So fine. He's now taken away all responsibility from the person who did whatever they did. That's good, right? But under normal, most people are not like that. Here, you put a dent in your best friend's car, right? So I'm really sorry. Okay, he accepts your apology, but he expects you to pay for the damage. It's 2 completely different things, right?
Yeah.
We very often make the mistake of thinking that if I forgive that person for what he did to me, however bad it was, right? If I forgive that person, then I just absolved him from all responsibility for what he did, and it's not true. And you should know that that makes forgiving people a lot simpler, a lot easier, right? In our minds, it makes it a lot easier emotionally, right? Because up until now I thought that if I say that I accept this person's responsibility, then that's it. It's as if he never did what he did. And for sure that's not true. Absolutely not true.
But then doesn't it turn the act of giving forgiveness into the same act of, oh, I'm sorry for whatever I did? That's like, it seems to take the meaning out of it.
Maybe a little bit, but you should know. We all of us here know in this room that there's a big difference between going up to somebody and saying, I'm sorry, and going up to somebody and saying, I'm sorry, but I did whatever I did. Right? Mm-hmm. We all know that. It's a lot easier to say to somebody, I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. What are you sorry for? It doesn't matter. Just accept my apology. I'm sorry, really, believe me. What did you do?
Is he supposed to tell him?
Yeah. Which means like this. If you yeah.
But if he doesn't, all he says is, "I want to."
Then he hasn't done what he's supposed to. How can the other person be moichel? How can he forgive him if he's got no idea what the person did?
What happens after 3 times?
After 3 times, if the person is still saying no, then it becomes it's not his responsibility anymore. I've done everything I need to do.
Unless it's a rabbi.
Unless it's somebody, right? Unless it's a rabbi, unless it's somebody who's obviously on a much higher standing than you, who wants to. He's only doing it because he wants to teach you a certain lesson over here, right? Again, if it's being done because of like personal reasons then it's not so clear anymore. But if it's he wants you to learn a lesson. If that's the case, then for sure. I once heard the most incredible story. Listen to this. I may have told you this story in the past, but it's really when you stop and think about it, the more you think about it, the more incredible it really is. There was a great rabbi from the previous generation called Rabbi Lauffer. And Rabbi Lauffer, once somebody did something to him, I don't know what it was, right? But it was obviously pretty bad. So he came to Rabbi Lauffer to ask his forgiveness. So Rabbi Lauffer told him to come back in a week. And the fellow came back in a week and he asked him for forgiveness again. Rabbi Elia said, I forgive you, b'leiv shalom, with a complete heart. I forgive you for what you did. So the fellow, as he was leaving, he says to Rabbi Elia, he says, I truly appreciate the fact that the Rav forgave me. He says, but why did the Rav make me come back in a week? So listen to what he said. Rabbi Elia Lapian said, what you did really, really upset me. And it took me a whole week of working on myself to be able to undo those feelings inside of me, to get rid of those feelings inside of me, to make it okay for me to be able to forgive you. You hear what's going on? I don't know if you realize the depth of that particular story. We all imagine that the person who did something bad to somebody else, he's the one who's got to work hard, right, in order to get forgiveness. But you know what? If we've been hurt, right? Everyone here in this room has been hurt from time to time, right? When you've been hurt, you know how hard it is. You've got to work on yourself to not allow that hurt to become a part of you.
Fun. Like a global belief in every person. You start generalizing that every person looks like him is going to...
Yeah.
The jerk.
And it's terrible, right? It really is terrible. And you'll see that there are people who have feuds with other people from things that happened, 40 years ago. Fun. And the emissaries, they don't even remember what they're fighting about anymore.
There's families that fight.
Families, it's something
that
terrible.
Generations, they don't even know what the problem was.
Terrible, terrible. Here, you see them? We don't speak to them. Hi, what happened? I don't know. Something with my great-grandfather. I don't know what happened, but we don't speak to them.
Yeah.
It's terrible. It's absolutely terrible.
It's very true.
It's mamish. What's the problem? The problem is like this. We're sitting over here in this room, and we're all getting on with each other. So it's easy to talk like this, right? What do you do when it actually happens to you? Something happens to you. So I had a lesson from somebody who I was very close to. It was a lesson for life. He asked me to take him to somebody once. He asked me to take him to a family member, to his sister. Mm-hmm. So we drove to his sister, and he went to sit down over there. It took, how long it took to get there. And we'd been sitting there for about 2 or 3 minutes, and he says, okay, it's time for us to go. His demeanor hadn't changed at all. He was right. We walk out of the house. We say goodbye. We walk out of the house. It was before Rosh Hashanah. We walk out of the house. We get into the car, and we're on the way back. I'm taking him back to where he came from. And I said to him, excuse me for asking, but, we went all this way to visit your sister. why didn't you want to stay there? Right? We were there for all of 3 minutes or something, and nothing of any substance was said. So he said, I'll tell you the truth. He says, I sat over there, and I realized that I was looking at something that came from my parents' home, which in my father's will, it was supposed to be mine, not hers. He said, and I knew that if I stayed there and I looked at it, it was going to get me really upset, and I would probably end up saying something I should never have said. He said, so I told you, let's just go home. I don't want to get upset. I don't want to say things that are going to make everybody not speaking to each other. It was the other side. The other side was not Beseder. They took something they shouldn't have taken.
In my opinion.
I don't know. I think that showed the most incredible level. It could be that later on.
Fierce.
No. I think it could be that later on, right? When maybe a few days later, a week later, maybe a month later, when he was calm enough, maybe at that point, maybe he did speak with her about it. But at the moment, right? At the moment that you see it's happening, so that's difficult. It's very difficult, right?
It's very strong.
You don't want to say something,
say it the right way.
which is not always possible to do when you're upset.
When you're upset, I agree.
You know that the Sfas Emes, the great one of the great Hasidic Rebbes, the second Rebbe from Gur, the Sfas Emes says that you should never ever tell off children when you're angry with them. You hear? Because the only thing the kid is going to learn is that when daddy's angry, I get told off. They don't look and see that playing baseball inside the house and breaking the priceless Ming vase was maybe not the smartest thing to do. All they learn from that is that when daddy gets angry, I get told off. Says the Sfas Emes, so don't tell off your children when you're angry. Don't try to have delicate conversations, sensitive conversations with people about things that you think they've done wrong whilst you're angry.
Right. That makes
Right?
sense.
And I think that was the lesson that I picked up from that, which he was saying. I didn't want to get upset. And if I would have mentioned it, for sure it would have turned into a fight, for sure. And who knows what happens with these fights. It's unbelievable, right? Rav Zalman Nechemia Goldberg, who is one of the greatest halachic authorities living in Yerushalayim today, he told me once, he has a beis din, and he told me once that 80, I can't remember what, 80 or 85% of what comes to him in the beis din is to do with Yerushas, inheritance. He says families fight over inheritance. He says it's something terrible, and it makes no difference. These were his words. It makes no difference whether they're fighting over $1,000 or $1 million. You hear?
Yeah. That's crazy.
It's terrible. It's mamish terrible. So it's better. What can I tell you? I mean, it's better. It's better. It's hard. It's hard work. Forgiving people is hard work, right? It really is. It really is, right?
I think you write up some words, some of the people don't even pay attention to that. So why write some words? I mean, I sometimes I wonder, what are they thinking?
I don't know. I heard from Rav Osher Weiss. His advice was to all parents. Obviously, it's not always going to work. He says write a will. He says, but he said that to make sure that all the children know what each one is going to get. You don't just go to one of them and say, listen, you're bless you, adisui. Don't go to each one and say, you're going to get this and you're going to get that, but call them all together and say, look, this is going to this one, this is going to that one. That way, no one can come afterwards and say, hey, Daddy told me, right, that I was going to get the safe with with all the jewelry and the cash in it, and you people can have the rest. Yeah, right? Doesn't work, right? It's what he said. That's what he needs to do. He says that he said when his father-in-law passed away, his father-in-law had given away everything to all of his children towards the end of his life, and he said when he passed away, he didn't have anything left. And he said there was no fights. There was nothing to fight about.
Didn't you say it before, if I'm not mistaken, if somebody passed away, you what do a prayer because you're getting something out of it, no?
When a person passes away, and a person, if a person's getting an inheritance,
yes.
So there's a bracha to make, yeah. If one person is inheriting everything, then you say Shechianu, which is an astonishing bracha to make over somebody passing away. If an inheritance is being shared by people, then you say the bracha toiva meitiv, which is, it's good. It's a good bracha. Even inside of the terrible loss of, normally it's like a parent, right? And the children are inheriting from the parent, or maybe it's a grandparent, whatever it is. But normally inside of the terrible loss, so nevertheless there is something that a bracha can be recited over.
When would that bracha be made?
Good question. I don't know. It's a great big halachic fullness about whether it should be made on hearing about the person passing away, or whether it should be made on actually receiving whatever the inheritance is. Ask your local Orthodox rabbi when the time comes, Emir Hashem. None of you should know any of these things for many, many years, Emir Hashem. But when the time comes, ask when would be the correct time to recite that kind of a blessing. If you have upset your rabbi, here, so you mentioned, right, that the rabbi doesn't want to forgive him. Maybe, hopefully he doesn't want to forgive him for educational reasons, right? That the person should understand that he's done something wrong, and the rabbi feels that whatever, maybe there's something lacking inside of this person's, inside of his kavanah. He hears that something's not right, yeah? So it says over there, the rabbi doesn't have any obligation to forgive him on the third time, but he can continue telling him that he's not going to forgive him, and the person should keep coming back, even after 3 times. Keep coming back to the rabbi and ask for his forgiveness. What about if it's too embarrassing for you to go to the person himself and ask for forgiveness? So you can send somebody in your stead, right? Now, I don't know what's too embarrassing. Everybody's got their own levels of embarrassment, right? Which means that for one person, maybe it's breaking the window. He's too embarrassed to go to his neighbor and say it was me. So you can send somebody else to say, look, he did it and he wants to be able to ask forgiveness and to repay the damage. For somebody else, it may be something much, much bigger than that, right? So again, each one according to what their embarrassment is, but they can send somebody to act as a go-between. What does a person do if they've stolen money? So if you steal money, you should give it back, not just money, anything, right? So,
Could you tone it with tzedakah?
huh? Oh, so listen. It's an interesting halacha. Let's say somebody stole $1,000 from somebody. You know what? Forget about it. We're talking about somebody who spent the last 20 years, he was a cat burglar, right, going into people's homes, and he worked. His area of work was in Flatbush and Borough Park, which means that he's Jewish, and now 20 years later, after a very lucrative career in cat burglary, he's now decided that he's retiring, and he starts going to some shiurim, and all of a sudden, unfortunately, he starts to become frum, and all of a sudden he realizes, wait a second, the last 20 years I must have stolen, $3 million in total from I don't know how many houses, where they all came from. What am I supposed to do? I got to give it back, but I've got no idea who to give it back to. So the halacha is absolutely fascinating. If you know where you took it from, so give it back to whoever you took it from. And if you don't give it to charity per se, but rather you give it to something which is going to benefit the people, that benefit the community. So let's say, for example, in a minute I'll explain the logic, but let's say, for example, they're collecting money to put up street lights. You would give the money for street lights. They're collecting money to make parks. You would give the money to give parks. Why is that? Because really the obligation is to give the money back to the people that you stole it from. But you've got no idea who they are. So what do? You give the money back to the community in the hope that indirectly the people who you stole from will get benefit from it as well. You hear the idea, right? So it's not just an inyan of going to your local soup kitchen and giving them the money and they'll give out the soup, because I don't know, is that going to reach the person who you stole from? Probably not. But if you give money to, like I said, for street lights or for parks or for that kind of thing, so you're making life better for everybody around you, and hopefully you're making life better for the person who you took the money from as well. So it's a very beautiful idea, it really is.
So could you use it to pay local taxes?
No, not yours. You could give it as a donation to your local municipality that they should use it for something, whatever they feel fit to use it for, that's a possibility. But not for you to pay your local taxes with, no. I tell you an interesting story. I have a my chavrusa is a rav of a moshav. He's actually a Yemenite. There's a moshav near Beit Shemesh, and he said a few years ago somebody came to him and he said like this: a person had started becoming progressively frumer, and he came and he said, "Listen," he says, "here's what happened." He said, "About 5 years ago, I needed money, so I set my car on fire, and I claimed insurance." Cars over here are pretty expensive, right? Big tax. So, you know, he got whatever money he wanted, he got from the insurance claim, and, you know, it passed through. And he says, but he said now the person's he started becoming frumer, and he came to the rabbi, he says, look, he says, I want to give the money back. Good. So my rabbi, and my chavrusa, he says, you know what? He says, fine. He says, leave it. He thought it was going to be like a 2-minute thing, right? He says, leave it with me, I'll take care of it. He phones up the insurance company, and he says, look, he says, I'm not telling you who it is, but there's somebody over here, I don't know what the figure was, 50,000 shekels, let's say, right? He's got 50,000 shekels that he received that he should never have received, and he wants to give it back.
Imagine getting that phone call.
He's personally speaking to on the phone. She says to him,
Bring it to me.
she says to him,
unmarked paper bag and leave it at such and such mailbox.
she says to him, well, she says, I've got no idea how you do that. She said, I work with a computer. She says, I don't see anywhere over here that allows me to put money back into the system. She says, here, speak to my supervisor. He says, it took 3 weeks until finally he spoke to the deputy, we're talking about the deputy CEO, whatever he's called. This is an enormous insurance company here in Israel. The guy's from, right? So they're sitting in this real fancy office. He got invited down to Tel Aviv to this, right? Sitting in this real fancy office, and he explains to him the problem, and the fellow says to him, we have no way of putting that money back into the system. He says, I don't know what to tell you. We can't do it. So he told him to give the money. Reuven. He gave it to, he put it,
community?
Make some, I don't remember what he put it into exactly, right? He put it into something, 50,000 shekels donated to something that was going to help the tzibur, the community, and in the hope, what's the problem? The money that he claimed from the insurance company, it's a public company. So I think over there it's probably a little bit easier, right? Because, lots and lots of people owns, maybe in your pension plan you own some of these shares, right? So the chances of you doing something over here in this area, maybe it is going to, help out some of the people that own shares. If they've got shares in the company, then you're doing what you're supposed to do. Whatever, it's not supposed to. It really isn't.
Could he have taken out an insurance policy on something that maybe he didn't own?
That's a great question, right?
That he would never intend to
take out an insurance cap for whatever, for 50,000 shekels, and not claim whatever it is, right? Yeah. So I asked that question. I actually asked it to somebody else, Rav Zilberstein, who's one of the biggest halachic authorities. So he said like this, most incredible thing. His first reaction was, that's a great idea. Let him take out insurance for 50,000 shekels on something and never claim on it, right? And then the money stays in the system. But then he starts thinking like this. This is really complicated, right? Insurance companies reinsure. Right? There are companies like Lloyd's. What do Lloyd's do? Lloyd's don't insure your car, right? Lloyd's Insurance, one of the biggest insurance companies in the world. What do? They insure the insurance companies.
Right.
Right? Which means that you're...
They didn't lose anything.
Huh? No, so there's a whole cheshbon over. You've got no idea from that 50,000 shekels, right? You've got no idea what belongs to what went to where, what is which is what, right? So in the end, he said, you know what? He said, even though it's a fascinating idea, he says, but I don't think that's the correct thing to do. Now, again, in a different kind of a scenario, it could be that you could come up with let's say, for example, a person stole from a company, right? A paper company, right? They stole 50,000 shekels worth of paper. You could make a 50,000 shekel order for more paper, give the wrong address, it'll never get to you, finished, right? So they end up with the 50,000 shekels paid back to them, and the paper right? There are ways of doing it. You know, a person stole things from a shop. You could go to the shop and you could buy exactly what was stolen and just leave it in the shop.
The thing is that so many businesses have their own insurance, so it really is insurance companies that would have to be paid back, and you can't know which one. Or
For sure,
who
right.
owns it.
Who's insuring this one over here? And how's it being done? Where's it going through? I mean, it's stuff is really
I never
complicated.
considered that insurance companies would have insurance.
Yeah, they do.
Oh, yeah.
Here, good. Okay, we're gonna stop over here. Okay.